Okay, so in the last video we added a particle system of steam to our door blueprint, which will look pretty cool if we can get it under control. So if I come over here to the My Blueprint panel, I'll see that I have a category for effects, and I have a steam particle system in there, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this steam, I'm going to drag and drop it over here on my graph, and I'm going to set it to be a get node. So there we go. So now I have my steam. Now what I need to do is I need to look at my blueprint, and I also have to think about my instructions, right? Now that we have a particle system, the first thing that I want with this particle system is I want to tell Unreal when the game starts, this particle system has to be off because it can only turn on when the door gets open. So we have to make sure the particle system is off when we start. So if we jump back to the level, we hit play, we walk up to this door and look at it, well, the particle system is already starting. Now it looked like it started when the door opened, but that's just an illusion. So let's go to the side of the door. We can see the particle systems have started and the door is not even open. So that's incorrect. That's not what we want, at least not for this example. So the first thing we need to do is tell Unreal, keep those particles shut off when the game starts. The easiest way to do that, and we could actually do that here in Blueprint, but it'll be redundant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Components, I'm going to click on Steam, I'm going to go down all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see this Auto Activate option, which is on by default. I want to turn that off, and I'm going to compile this, save it, jump back into the game. I'm going to run around the side here so I don't touch the trigger. I'm going to look at the door, and now you'll notice there's no particles. So we've successfully told Unreal to keep those particles off when the game starts. Do not auto-activate them. I'm going to go to the graph now. Okay, so here's our Steam variable, right? What we need is a way to tell Unreal, okay, now that the door is opening, go ahead and activate these particles. Turn them on when the door opens. So the easiest way to do that is I'm going to click on a blue pin here from the Steam particle system, and I'm just going to go ahead and let the contextual menu help me out. So I know that auto activate turns off the particles automatically when the game starts. So it sounds like the terminology activate is the right word to use here. So I'm going to look for something called activate. And cool. Look at this, the filter just narrowed down two entries for us. We have an activate and we have a deactivate. So right now what I want to do is I want to activate the particles when the door opens. So I'm going to get the activate, and that's going to work perfect. See, it's already plugged in and it's ready to go. So now I need to actually turn this activate on by plugging something into this execution input. So what we need to do is we need to look at our blueprint and go, okay, now that I can activate this, when do I activate it? Do I activate it after the door opens? Do I activate it while the door is in the middle of opening? Do I activate it before? What do I do? So in my head what I'm thinking is the player walks up to the trigger. When they overlap or touch the trigger or start touching it, that's when I think the steam should start, because this means the door is getting ready to open. So the steam starts up and then the door opens. So we know that this trigger volume here controls that. So I'm going to take this guy, move him up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the execution pin here and I'm going to plug that into activate. And what will happen is when we go into trigger, we'll activate the particle system called steam. Alright. Once we activate it, then we want the door to start to open. And that's it. So I'm going to compile this, jump back in here. Let's play this. Let's run around to the side here. Don't touch the trigger. The particles are off, which is perfect. Now, based on what we did, theoretically, what should happen, or what we think will happen, is when I go into trigger, the particles will start to emit, and then the door will open. So let's go in here. Let's go in this trigger. There, the particles are starting, but the door's already open. So we got the functionality to work. The particles are working, and the door's opening. The problem is the door's opening a little bit too soon. So by the time the particles start to fire up, the soft kind of slow steam takes too long, and by the time it starts to show up and we see it in all its glory, the door has already been opened. So everything's working, just we need to work on our timing. Our timing's off. So what is one of the best ways to control timing in a blueprint? Well, we already saw that in a previous video. The delay node. The delay node allows us to delay an action by X amount of seconds, whatever we want, before next action occurs. So that's pretty cool. So what we can do is use a delay node. So let's do that. I'm going to pull this guy over here, and what I'm going to do is, there's actually a shortcut for this. I could right click and then start to type in the word delay, and there it is. Or I can actually hold down the D key, D for delay, and then click. And that's actually a shortcut key in order to create this. So all you do is hold down the D key and then left click wherever you want it. So if I want it down here, I'll click there while holding down the D key for delay. Okay. Now I'll have to take this activate and plug it in here, and then I'm going to take the delay and plug that here. So now what's going to happen is when we go into the trigger, this guy is going to activate this particle system, and then it's going to start basically a little timer. Okay, and let's set that timer for about, I don't know, maybe 3 seconds, something like that. And then once the 3 seconds have finished, then we're going to go ahead and start to open the door. So that should look more interesting. Let's compile that, save, jump back over here, jump in the game, no particles. When I go into the trigger, the door does not immediately open. The particles are going to start up, and then the door opens. Now we can't really see the particles, and that's not because of the blueprint, that's because of the particle system itself. Let me go to the particle system here. It's in the middle of the door, so the particles are actually being blocked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it a little bit in front of the door just for demonstration purposes. And I'm going to jump back in here and play. If I look at this, no particles. When I walk into the trigger, particles, oh, you know what? They're on the other side. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm looking at this the wrong way. So let me do this instead. I'm going to jump at the blueprint, and I'm just going to rotate this guy 180 degrees this way. Okay, I'm going to jump into the trigger here. There's the particles, and then the door opens. So you've got a nice little 3-second delay. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the graph, and I'm going to set that to about 4 seconds. And there's a really cool thing that we can do here to kind of make this a little bit more usable, so we don't have to keep coming back to blueprint every time we want to change this. What I can do is I could set up a variable for this. So check this out. It'd be cool, just like with the door stuff, if we had like a door open type variable that we can edit from here, right here in the details panel, that controls this delay duration. We can actually do that. So what I can do is I could go over here and I can right click and I could choose promote to variable, and it's going to create a new variable for me, and it's going to place it over here. Let me delete that. What I just did was the same exact thing as coming over here to the My Blueprint panel and going to new variable and typing in a name or whatever, and then setting this to a float, right? And then taking this, dragging it and dropping it, doing a get, and then connecting it here. See all those steps I just took? I'm going to go ahead and delete that and delete that. All that stuff I just did is the same thing. So the fastest way of creating new variables sometimes is by coming over here and just right clicking on this guy and just going to promote to variable. It'll create a new variable that automatically fits this data type. It'll give it a default name called new var, which is short for new variable, and it'll place it in your graph. So that's extremely fast. With one click, I basically did multiple steps. And then what I can do is I can select that new variable here and maybe change its name, because that would make sense. So let's call this steam delay. That's what that's going to be. And then we'll add a tooltip. And we'll say amount of time to emit steam before door opens. Okay, that's our tooltip. And finally, we'll click the little eye icon so that it's available to us inside of the Unreal Editor, and we can edit it there. Now we know that this is also something that has to do with effects because it has to do with Steam. So I'm going to go down to Category, set that to Effects, and now it's neatly inside of the Effects category. So I'm going to compile this, save, and I'm going to jump back into the map. And now you'll see that we have this effects steam delay. By default it's set at 0, so there's going to be no delay, which is not good. So I'm going to go and take the default property here, and I'm going to set it to 3 is what we had it at before, right? So I'm going to compile and save, go back to the map, and now we'll see the default value is now 3. So if I jump in here, go up to the door, start to see the particles, and then the door opens. Looks pretty cool, but maybe I want to slow it down a little bit more. Instead of going back to the blueprint and doing this and compiling that again, I can just come over here to the steam delay parameter, set it to maybe 4 seconds. Maybe that's what I want to do instead. And I don't have to compile anything. I can just go ahead and jump in here and see the change immediately. So there's the particles. They emit for a good amount of seconds, and then the door opens. Cool. So we got our particles working. Awesome. Now the next thing that we need to do is we have a problem, and the problem is if I jump in here and we activate this, the particles start up, door's going to open in a couple of seconds. There it is. Pretty cool. We got some hot steam. If we walk away, the door should close after that other delay. There it goes. It's closed. But we have a problem. The particles are still going. They're not stopping. They just keep going on and on forever. Well, let's think about that. What did we want Unreal to do? We wanted it to have a particle system with this door, make sure the particle system is off at the beginning of the game, make sure the particle system only activates when the door is going to open, make sure that the particle system plays for a few seconds before the door actually opens so that it looks cooler to the player. But then we're missing the other half of it, which is after a few seconds, stop emitting particles. So the way to do that is actually pretty easy. What we'll do is we'll use these guys again. Now, the activate is going to turn on the particles. It does not turn them off. And this guy's the steam over here. So what we need to do is, this is what I'm going to do just to make things simpler. I'm going to take the steam, I'm going to hit Control and W to make a copy of that. And this doesn't mean that there's 2 different particle systems. If I go back to components, we only have one steam, but we have 2 nodes that represent that one steam. That way I could use this one down here to do other stuff. So I'm going to click on the pin, drag it out here, let Unreal help me out. So we know that activate turns on the particles. So naturally, the opposite of activating something is deactivating something. So let's look for deactivate, and there it is. We have a deactivate function, and that's the one that we want. It's the opposite of activate. Perfect. So this function is going to deactivate the steam particle system. Now we need to tell Unreal, okay, this is when we want you to deactivate the particles. So when do we want the particles to deactivate? Well, let's say after the particles have emitted for a few seconds or whatever, we want the steam to deactivate. So basically we walk up to the door, the steam starts up, fires off for a few seconds, the door opens, and then the steam stops and it starts to kind of dissipate and vaporize in the air. And then we go to the door and we leave, and the door closes behind us. We're done. Beat the game. We're finished. Now it's ready to play part 2 of this crazy game. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to take this deactivate stuff and I'm going to move it up here. And what I want is, I want basically when the door starts to move, when the door starts to open, I basically want a timer to start and tell Unreal, okay, the door started to open. In about 3 seconds, let's go ahead and turn those particles off and stop emitting steam. That sounds like it would work. So we know that the door movement's being controlled by this timeline here. We know that this update over here is actually what's setting the new location for the door. So every frame or every moment of time, this door is being moved and being slid down into the open position by this door movement timeline, right? So we could use update and plug it here, and that would allow us to do what we need to do. But there's a problem. If I do that, now I got to plug this in here, and that's not exactly what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to take this update and I want to be able to plug it into multiple things. Unfortunately, if I do this, that's not going to work because we can only update one thing at a time. So we can't just take this and plug it into 5 or 6 different nodes. That's not going to work. So it looks like we're stuck. Well, not quite. There's a flow control node in Unreal 4 and Blueprint that allows us to handle specifically this type of problem. So let me show you what that is. I'm going to take this update and I'm going to let it go out here into empty space. That's going to bring up my Blueprint contextual menu. What I want to search for, and you probably won't know this at first, but I'm going to show it to you, it's something called a sequence node, and it's under the category of flow control. So I'm going to click sequence, and it's going to create this sequence. What this sequence allows you to do is it allows you to take one of these execution pins, the white ones, and break it up into several different execution pins that can then be plugged into different stuff. So now I can plug this guy into the sequence node, and then I could split that into deactivate and into the set relative location. And what it's going to do is it's first going to send this guy out, the first one on the top, to the deactivate, and then once that's done, about a millisecond later, it's going to send this one over here. So it happens instantly. As far as you and I are concerned, it happens at the speed of light. It happens so fast, it looks instant. You won't be able to see, you know, one and then the other unless you set up like a delay of 4 seconds or something like that. So now, when the door starts to move, it starts to update its position by moving, it's going to go ahead and deactivate the particles. And it's then going to go ahead and it's going to go ahead and do this. Set the relative location of the door to the new position. Alright. That looks like it might work. Then again, it might not. This is kind of a thing where you have to kind of play around with this and kind of think about what you're doing here. And I'm starting to realize this might actually be a mistake. Not using the sequence node, but just the way I have everything plugged in. And I'll explain why in a moment. Okay, so anyway, let's try this out and let's even see if this works at all. Because the first thing that we want to see is if our crazy idea works. So no particles, run in the trigger. There's the particles. Now the door starts to open and the particles should deactivate. There we go. They deactivated. Cool. So the particles are so slow that it looks like there's a delay. Even though they got deactivated as soon as the door started to open, the particles went ahead and, you know, it looked like they were on a delay, like they turned off a few seconds after the door started to open. So that's pretty cool. That works pretty well. Let me jump in here again. I want to test one more thing. So we know that the particles work. When you walk over here, the particles turn on, door opens. Now the particles are turning off, so the steam goes away. Now I'm going to walk away from the door. The door should close again in a few seconds. There it is, closed. Now I'm going to walk over and see if the particles work again. There they are. They're working again. So now the door opens, and the particles are going to go ahead and turn off. Cool. Nice. That works really cool. Alright, so it did work. But there is one issue here that I'm looking at this just because I understand Blueprint. The problem is this update is happening every tick. So think of it every frame or whatever in Unreal's, time-space continuum. This thing's being updated. So you're getting the signal being sent to here. So this deactivate is being turned on all of the time. Okay? And we might be able to see that if I do this. If I take this and I do like a print string, I'll just let it say hello. It's going to be kind of creepy, but that's cool. I'm going to jump in here, go up to the door, particles start up, and look at that. It's telling us hello over and over again. Basically every tick during that timeline, it's saying hello, 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 hello. So this thing's basically going deactivate, 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 deactivate every single tick. In this case, in this specific tutorial case, it's not going to cause a problem. It's not going to make the computer catch on fire or anything like that. But if you have a complex game with a lot of different pieces of code flying all over the place, especially if you're doing networking or multiplayer stuff, this can be unnecessary overhead. Why would you want to keep firing off this information every single tick? And yeah, there's no point in doing that. So we basically want to fire off the deactivate one time as opposed to a billion times. So what I'm going to do is, let me get rid of that. Sequence node is what I want to use, but it's in the wrong place right now. So I'm going to disconnect that, disconnect all this stuff. I'm holding the Alt key and clicking on those pins. I'm going to keep this update right here because that's what I want. What I want to do instead is probably over here, what I'm going to do, this is where I'm going to stick the sequence node. So I'm going to take this delay, plug it here, and then this sequence node is going to control all this stuff. So here's what's going to happen. When we go into the trigger, we're going to activate this particle system, and we're going to activate it a few seconds late, or we're going to wait a few seconds after. I'm sorry, let me do that again. When we go into trigger, we'll activate these particles immediately. After the particles have become activated, which will happen in a split second, we're going to begin a delay timer to stop the door from moving too soon. Remember that? Based on the steam delay, which is set at about 4 seconds inside of the level. After the delay is finished and the few seconds or whatever have passed, we want the door to open as usual. So I'm going to take the second pin, plug it in there. But we also want our particles to deactivate. But if we take this, bring it over here, if we deactivate the particles, the moment that the door starts to open, then we're going to, well, they may not deactivate too fast. It may actually work well. So let me see how that works. Let's try it out. There's only one way to find out, by testing, right? Just jump in here. Particles start up. Door's going to open, and then the particles should turn off. So door opens, and the particles, there we go. They're starting to go away, and they're gone. If I back away from the door should close. I think the delay for the door is maybe a little bit too long, and there's no particles. If I come back to the door, there's the particles again. Door should open. There it is. The particles should go away about now, and there they are. They're gone, and we're good to go. So I just tested it. It looks like this door works perfectly fine, or the way that I wanted it to. Cool. So this works out better because now, if I do a print string on this, compile that, jump back in here. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. We should get a print string once. When the particles, there it goes. See in the top left, the hello? The particles got the signal to turn off. The switch got flipped once instead of some little kid flipping the light switch over and over and over again really, really fast for a few seconds. That's how you end up with broken electrical in your house. Okay, cool. So now it works the way that I want to. Instead of having this deactivate being triggered over and over and over again like crazy, we have it triggered once. We get the door to open and do all its cool stuff, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Yeah, this blueprint is pretty much done. So one last thing I want to do is I'm going to go to this guy. I'm just going to touch this up a little bit. This this timeline curve, the door track float right now, I kinda don't like the way the door opens. It's too linear, like it's too straight and stiff. So I want to make it a little bit more organic and give it a little bit of weight, like if gravity's pulling down on it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this guy, hold down Shift and click the last point, and then I'll right click. Or actually, it looks like we won't be able to do both at the same time. So just right click on one and go to Cubic Auto. Then I'm going to click on this one, right click and go to Cubic Auto, and that's going to make the curve nice and soft. So what I can do is I can grab these handles and I can move them like this. And the cool thing about that is I can control the way that the door appears to move. So I can make it move really fast at the beginning and then slow at the end. So let's see what this gives us right here. I'm going to save this, jump back in here, go to my door. Door's going to, it moves really fast and then it slows down toward the bottom. And if I come out of the door and look at it, it should start up a little bit slow, see that? And then it speeds up when it reaches the top. 2 seconds is actually too fast for that door. I would probably set that door to maybe like 4 seconds. Take the last point and set the time to 4 seconds. And this will give the door an appearance of moving a little bit slower, which is actually what I want. And that looks pretty good. Let's jump back in there. Let's walk up to this door and get it to open. So it really slows down right at the end. See that? More like a mechanical sort of door. And then when it closes, it'll start up kind of slow and then speed its way up to the top. So that looks a little bit more natural and realistic as opposed to how it was before. And again, just select these points, right click, if I can get to them, and select one of these different modes, because by default they're set to linear. You want to set them to like cubic. Auto is pretty good. Yeah, I would probably stick with that. You could try lock and break. If you ever worked with animation software like Maya or something like that, this stuff will probably be pretty familiar to you. If not, that's how you use it. So this is a really small blueprint, pretty straightforward, nothing really complicated about it, but should get your feet wet with Blueprint and get you kind of going along your way. Now there's a ton of different nodes in Blueprint to use. What you'll have to do is read a lot of documentation, experiment, go on forums, ask people how they're doing their stuff, and just slowly start to learn what you can program with Blueprint. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this set of videos. This was a lot of fun to set up. It's always fun to explain this stuff and demonstrate to people how this stuff works. Yeah, have fun with Blueprint. Don't be afraid of it. Blueprint's your new best friend when it comes to video game development. Play with it, enjoy it, understand it, and you'll get better at it. I guarantee it. So take care.